I came home earlier than usual that day. My heart felt light because I thought I would finally spend time with Anna and my two boys, Liam and Noah. "Anna, I'm home," I called as I stepped inside. No answer. I frowned. "Anna?" From the living room, I heard the TV running low. The boys were sitting on the floor playing with blocks. "Hey, Dad," Liam said without looking up. Noah smiled. "You're early today." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Where is your mom?" Liam pointed toward the kitchen. "She is there." But she didn't talk much. That caught my attention. I walked into the kitchen and saw Anna standing near the sink. She was staring out the window like she was lost somewhere far away. "Anna," I said softly, "are you okay?" She turned slightly. "I'm fine." But her voice did not feel fine. I stepped closer. "You seem different today." I said I'm fine, she repeated, colder this time. Something inside me tightened. "Did something happen?" I asked. "No," she replied quickly. "Just tired." I nodded slowly, but I didn't believe her. That night after dinner, the house became quiet. The boys fell asleep early. I sat on the couch beside Anna. "Can we talk?" I asked. She didn't look at me. "About what?" "About us," I said. "About you. You feel far away." She stood up. "I don't want to talk." "Anna, please," I said. "If something is wrong, we fix it together." She turned sharply. "Not everything can be fixed." Those words hit me like a stone. Later, I saw her phone on the table. It lit up with a message. "Daniel, I miss you. When will you leave him?" My breath stopped. I looked again. Another message. "He suspects nothing, right?" My hands shook. "Anna," I whispered. She came back from the bedroom. "What are you doing?" I held the phone. "Who is Daniel?" Her face changed instantly. "Give me that," she said. But I didn't move. "Tell me," I said louder. "Who is he?" Silence filled the room. Finally she spoke. "It's not what you think." My heart broke right there. The next morning, she packed a small bag. "I need time away," she said. "Time?" I stepped forward. "What about the kids? What about me?" "They will be fine," she said. "No," I said. "Don't do this." She avoided my eyes. "Anna, please," I begged. "Stay. For Liam and Noah." She stopped for a second. But then she walked to the door. "I can't," she said quietly. And she left. I stood there, frozen. The door closed softly, but my world broke loudly inside me. I stayed there staring at the closed door. My ears rang like everything inside me had stopped working. "Anna?" I whispered, but no one answered me. The house felt too big suddenly. Too empty. From the hallway, I heard small footsteps. "Dad!" Noah's sleepy voice came. "Where is Mom going?" I turned quickly and forced my voice to stay normal. She went out for a while." Liam came behind him. "Why did she look sad?" I swallowed hard. "She is just tired. Okay? Go back to bed." But Liam didn't move. "You are lying." Those words hit me harder than anything. "No, I'm not," I said quickly. "Go to your room." They slowly walked away, confused. When they disappeared, my body finally broke. I dropped onto the couch, holding my head. My hands were shaking. I picked up her phone again. The message was still there. "Daniel, when will you leave him?" I whispered. "So this is real." My chest felt like it was being crushed. I threw the phone on the table. It hit the wood hard. "No, no, no, no," I kept repeating. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, pouring a glass of water, but my hand was shaking so much that it spilled. I laughed once, a broken laugh. "This is my life now?" I said to the empty room. I sat on the floor near the fridge, unable to stand anymore. Memories started hitting me. Anna laughing, holding my hand, saying she loved me. Was it all fake? I whispered. My phone rang suddenly. I looked at it. It was Mike. I answered fast. "Mike, what's wrong?" he asked. I tried to speak, but my voice broke. "She left. I think she left me." There was silence on the other side. Then Mike said, Where are the kids? They're here, I said. Stay strong, he said. I'm coming over. I hung up and sat there again. The house was silent, but my mind was screaming. I realized something in that moment. My life didn't just crack. It ended. I stood there as Mike closed the door behind him. He looked around the broken silence of my home. Sit down, he said softly. I sank into the couch without speaking. Mike said, we will fix this step by step. I nodded even though I didn't believe it. But in that moment I chose to keep breathing. For Liam and Noah, I had to stay alive inside. Mike stayed with me until the night got heavier. And I realized I would never be the same again. But I survived. I woke up to silence that didn't feel normal anymore. Anna was gone. The house felt too big, too empty, like it didn't belong to me. Liam stood in the kitchen doorway. Dad, is Mom coming back today? Noah followed him, rubbing his eyes. She said she went for a short time, right? I forced a smile. Yeah. She's just busy with work. Liam frowned. But she didn't even say bye. I froze for a second. Sometimes adults leave quickly, I said. Eat your breakfast. Noah whispered. I miss her. That hit me harder than anything. I know, I said softly. Me too. The doorbell rang. I opened it and saw Mike holding coffee and groceries. He looked at my face and sighed. You look like you didn't sleep at all. I didn't, I said. He walked in. Where are the kids? Kitchen, I said. Mike lowered his voice. Any news from her? I shook my head. Nothing. Mike placed the groceries down. You can't do this alone, man. I have to, I said. Mike looked at me. No, you don't. The kids came in. Uncle Mike, Liam said. Mike smiled. Hey, champ. Noah hid behind me. Mike knelt down. Hey, buddy. I brought snacks. Noah slowly came forward. I watched them, trying not to break. Mike stood up. We'll figure this out. One step at a time. I whispered. I don't even know where to start. Mike said, start with today. Later, after Mike left, the house got quiet again. The boys watched cartoons. I sat on the couch, staring at nothing. Then Liam asked, why did Mom leave? I froze. I looked at him. She didn't leave. She just needed space. Liam said, for how long? I don't know, I admitted. Noah asked, did we do something wrong? My heart broke. No, I said quickly. Never think that. Silence fell again. That night, after they slept, I checked her phone again. I shouldn't have, but I did. Messages were still there. Daniel, I told you this will be easier without them. My hands tightened. Another message. Soon you will be free. I whispered. So this wasn't new. Anger rose in my chest. I threw the phone on the table. No, I said. Not again. I sat down, breathing heavily. Mike's words echoed in my head. Start with today. I looked at my sleeping kids. I will not break, I whispered. Not in front of them. The next morning, I took Liam to school. He held my hand tightly. You will pick me up, right? Always, I said. Noah stayed home with me. He kept asking, when is Mom coming? I knelt down. I don't know, buddy. He hugged my neck. I want her. I closed my eyes. I know. At night, I sat alone again. The house was silent. My phone buzzed. Mike, checking on you, he said. I'm here, I replied. He said, don't isolate yourself. I can't think straight, I said. Mike paused. Then just survive the day. I looked at my kids sleeping. I am, I said. After the call, I stared at Anna's last messages again. Everything felt like a trap. But I made a decision. I whispered, I will not fall apart. Not anymore. I stayed awake longer that night, listening to the silence of the house. Every small sound made me think she might walk back through the door like nothing happened. Liam came to me before school the next morning. Dad, will Mom come to my school event next week? I paused. I don't know, son. He nodded slowly. Okay. That okay hurt more than questions. After dropping him at school, I sat in the car for a long time. My hands stayed on the steering wheel even though I wasn't driving anywhere. Mike called again. "You eating?" he asked. "I don't feel hungry," I said. "That's not an answer," he replied. I let out a weak laugh. "Nothing feels like an answer anymore." Mike sighed. "Just come by my place tonight. I can't leave the kids alone." "Bring them," he said. I looked back at the house. Maybe. That evening, Noah fell asleep early on the couch. Liam was doing homework quietly. I sat beside them and whispered, "I will protect you, no matter what happens." Liam looked up. "Even from Mom?" That question froze me. I forced my voice steady. "Even from life." He didn't fully understand, but he nodded. Later that night, I deleted her message thread from my screen but not from my mind. It still replayed every word. Daniel's name stayed in my head like poison. I whispered to myself, "This is not the end. I just have to survive the next day." Before sleep, Mike texted again asking if I was still awake. I replied with a simple yes. He said I should not carry everything alone, but I had no strength to explain what was breaking inside me. I looked at my children sleeping and realized my entire world had narrowed to them only. Everything else felt distant and unreal. I promised myself again that I would not fail them, even if I had to lose myself completely in the process. That was the only truth I could hold on to in that silent night. I stayed strong for them. I met Sarah outside my house in the morning. She waved at me. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I nodded. "Is something wrong?" She looked nervous. "It's about Anna." My heart tightened. "What about her?" "Sarah, what did you see?" I asked. "I saw her with Daniel many times," she said. "Together," I whispered. "Near the cafe holding hands," she said. "It started months ago." My stomach dropped. "You're sure?" "Yes," she said. "It started months ago." I stepped back. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "I didn't want to hurt you," she said. "But you deserve the truth." I swallowed hard. "So it was planned?" She nodded quietly. I turned away. "Thanks for telling me." She grabbed my arm. "There's more." "What more?" I asked. "Daniel works for Mr. Robert," she said. "He is powerful here." I felt dizzy. "How powerful?" "He controls Anna's office," she said. I whispered, "So she planned everything." Sarah nodded. I walked away. Mike called me later. "Are you okay?" "No," I said. "I know the truth now." "What truth?" he asked. "Anna was seeing someone before she left." Mike paused. "Damn. His name is Daniel," I said. "That guy works under Robert," Mike said. "So it's connected?" I asked. "Yes," Mike said. "This is deeper than cheating." I closed my eyes. "I don't care anymore." "What will you do?" Mike asked. "Protect my kids," I said. I visited Emma's office. "Tell me everything," she said. "My wife left. I have 2 children," I said. "Any custody issue?" Emma asked. "I don't know. I just want to be ready," I said. She nodded. "That's smart." "Can she take them?" I asked. "Legally, yes, if she proves stability," she said. My heart sank. "Even after abandoning them?" "Yes," she said. I clenched my fists. "Then I need protection." "We can file custody protection papers," Emma said. "Do it," I said. That night I sat alone. I whispered, "No more crying." I looked at my kids sleeping. "I will not chase Anna anymore," I said. Mike texted, "Are you okay?" "I'm done breaking," I replied. "Good. Now rebuild," he said. I looked at the sky. "I will rebuild for them," I said. Mike came over that evening. "You need to eat something," he said. "I can't feel hungry," I said. "You still have your kids," Mike said. I nodded silently. Noah woke up crying. I ran to him. "Mom," he cried. "She will be okay," I said. "I want her," he said. Liam stood watching. "You are lying again," he said. "I will fix us," I said. Mike said, "That's enough for today." I went to Emma's office next morning. You look exhausted, she said. I can't sleep, I said. We will secure custody rights, Emma said. Will she come back? I asked. Most likely, she said. She already collapsed, I said. I'm not angry anymore, just tired, I said. That's when people become dangerous, she said. I just want peace, I said. Then protect it, Emma said. Sarah was waiting outside. I'm sorry I didn't tell you earlier, she said. You did the right thing, I said. What will you do now? She asked. I will raise my kids, I said. And I will not chase her anymore, I said. That's strong, Sarah said. It's all I have, I said. I looked at the sky outside my window. No more chasing shadows, I whispered. Only forward, I said. Liam came beside me quietly. Dad, are we going to be okay? Yes, I said. We will be fine. Noah hugged my leg tightly. Don't leave us, he said. I will never leave you, I said. Mike stood at the door watching silently. We are here, Mike said softly. I took a deep breath and looked around my broken home becoming something new slowly. Not broken anymore, I whispered to myself. Only stronger for them, I said again. Sarah nodded from outside the window watching quietly. You will be okay, she said softly. I already am becoming okay, I replied. The night felt different for the first time in months. Not peaceful, but no longer empty. I stayed there with my children. And I did not break. I chose to survive for them. Forever strong now. For my sons only. Always. I woke up early and stared at the empty side of the bed and whispered Anna is really gone now, and I felt my chest tighten. I said out loud, this house feels different now. My phone rang and Mike said, hey, are you awake? And I replied, yeah, barely. He said, I found you a second job if you are ready, and I asked what kind of job, and he said warehouse night shift. I paused and said, I will do it for my kids. At breakfast, Liam looked at me and said, Dad, are we going to be okay? And I forced a smile and said, yes, we are going to be more than okay. Noah spilled milk and said, Mom would have helped me, and I said, I know, buddy, I will help you now, just tell me what you need. He nodded slowly and said, I miss her, and I said, me too, but we are still here together. Sarah knocked later and said, you look exhausted, and I said, I am just learning how to live like this. She said, you should not do everything alone, and I said, I have to be strong for them. She replied, strong people still accept help, and I stayed quiet for a moment and said, maybe you are right, but I am not used to it. Mike came in the evening and said, your shift starts tonight, and I said, I will be there no matter what. He said, don't break under pressure, and I said, I already broke once, I cannot break again. Liam asked while I was packing, Dad, will Mom call us? And I stopped and said, I don't think so, son. Noah asked why not, and I said, sometimes adults leave and don't come back even if we want them to. That night I worked my first shift and my body felt heavy, but I kept repeating to myself, I have to survive for them. My supervisor said, you look tired, and I said, I am fine, just focused. I thought about Anna, but I stopped myself and said, no more thinking. Days passed and I worked 2 jobs and came home late every night. Mike said, you are pushing too hard, and I said, I don't have a choice. Sarah brought food one night and said, eat properly, and I said, I will after I finish this work. She looked at me and said, you are becoming different, and I said, I have to become different or I will collapse. One evening Liam asked, Dad, why don't you smile anymore? And I froze and said, I am just busy, son. Noah hugged me tightly and said, don't leave us too, and I bent down and said, I will never leave you no matter what happens. That promise felt like the only thing holding me together. Mike said, you are changing, and I said, I am surviving, not changing. Sarah said, you are becoming stronger, and I said, strength is just what pain looks like when it refuses to stop. I stopped checking the door every night and stopped hoping Anna would return. Instead, I focused on rent, food, school, and survival. Liam asked again, will we be okay? And I said, yes, we will be okay, even if everything feels broken right now. Noah asked, will Mom ever come back? And I said, I don't know, but I am here every single day. Mike said, you are becoming unbreakable, and I said, I just learned I cannot afford to fall again. At the end of the week, I stood outside looking at the sky and said, I will build a life for my children no matter how hard it gets, and I walked back inside ready to face another day. Later that night, I sat with Emma the lawyer and said, I need to make sure my kids stay with me no matter what happens. She looked at my file and said, you are doing everything right but must stay consistent. I asked, can Anna still take them? And she said, only if she proves stability, and that made me angry. I said she abandoned them, and Emma replied, law does not run on emotion. I stayed silent but promised I will not let that happen. When I came home, Liam was doing homework and said, Dad, can you check this? And I said yes and sat beside him. He smiled and said, it feels like you are always tired, and I said, I am working hard for us. Noah climbed into my lap and said, you smell like work, and I laughed and said, that means I am trying. Mike called and said, don't forget to breathe, and I said, breathing is all I am doing right. He said, one day this will feel easier, and I said, I just want stable. Sarah texted and said, you are not alone, and I stared at it before replying, maybe not, but it feels like it. That night I stood by the door again but did not expect it to open. I whispered, Anna, I am done waiting, and closed the lights and walked back to my kids. I realized I was no longer the man who waited, I was the man who stayed. I chose peace over waiting for someone who left behind. I saw her again after 3 years outside the small grocery near my home, and my steps froze because I never expected Anna to appear in my life again like this. She looked thinner and tired, and her eyes were not the same anymore. Why are you here? I asked. I needed to see you, she said softly. I said, we have nothing left to talk about. She stepped closer and said, please just listen. I looked away and said, I only agreed to meet because of the children. She nodded quickly and said, I understand. I said, they barely remember you now. Her eyes filled with tears. I know I failed them, she said. I stayed silent for a moment and said, say what you came to say. She took a breath and said, Daniel left me. I replied, I heard. She continued, he lost everything and Mr. Robert cut him off too. I said, so you came when you had nothing left. She shook her head and said, no, I came because I regret everything. I felt something heavy in my chest, but I did not show it. I said, regret does not fix years. She whispered, I know. A long silence passed between us. She said, can I see the kids? I looked at her and said, that is not only my decision. She cried and said, I am their mother. I replied, you left when they needed you most. She covered her face and said, I was wrong, I was blind. I said, blind choices have consequences. She stepped back and said, I lost everything. I said, you walked away from everything. She cried harder and said, please give me another chance. I stayed quiet and looked at her broken state. Inside I felt nothing like before, only calm and control. I said, I cannot answer that now. She said, I will wait. I replied, waiting will not change what happened. She looked at me and said, do you hate me? I answered, I stopped feeling hate a long time ago. She whispered, then what is left? I said, responsibility. She asked, can we fix this? I said, not the way you think. A car passed beside us and I looked at the road instead of her. She said, I have no one left. I replied, that is something you created. She cried and said, I want my family back. I said, a family is not something you return to when life gets hard. She lowered her head and said, I deserve that. I said, yes, you do. Then silence came again, and I thought about Liam and Noah and how they were safe now without confusion. She said, let me at least try. I said, try what exactly? She said, to be their mother again. I said, that takes more than words. She looked at me helplessly and said, tell me what to do. I said, start by accepting they may not need you anymore. Her face collapsed again. I stood there and said, I am not angry anymore, but I am not the same man. She said, you changed. I replied, life changed me. She said, can I meet them? I said, I will ask them, not decide for you. She nodded slowly and said, thank you for not shutting me out completely. I said, this is not forgiveness. She whispered, I know. I turned slightly and said, I have to go now. She said, will I see you again? I said, only if the children want it. She stood still as I walked away, and I felt no victory, no revenge, only distance. And I realized I had finally moved on from the ghost of her. I kept walking down the street, feeling the weight slowly leaving my chest, even though I did not know what future would bring. My phone vibrated and Mike texted, how did it go? I stared at the screen and replied, I am fine, just tired. He replied, you sound different. I said, Maybe I finally stopped waiting. I looked at the sky and whispered, "This is not revenge, this is peace." I walked toward home thinking about Liam and Noah and how they would ask about her again and how I would answer honestly this time. No more lies, only truth given gently when they are ready. I realized I was no longer the man who waited for someone to return. I was the man who stayed even when everyone left. That truth settled inside me like stone but also like strength. I reached my house and saw Liam drawing at the table and Noah sleeping on the couch. I whispered, "I am home now." Liam looked up and said, "Did everything go okay?" I smiled slightly and said, "Yes, son, everything is going to be okay now." I sat beside them and felt a quiet peace I had not felt in years, and I knew I was finally healing, not because everything was perfect, but because I had stopped chasing what broke me and started protecting what still mattered most. My children were safe, and I was still here for them no matter what came next. I promised myself I would keep building this life day by day, no matter how hard it became, because I finally understood that survival was not enough anymore. It was. I learned from Emma that Daniel is under investigation for fraud and Mr. Robert Company is collapsing. Everything Anna depended on is falling apart. I said, "So it is really over then?" Emma nodded and said, "Yes, the case is very serious and many people are being questioned." I leaned back and said, "I do not feel happy about it, I just feel empty." Mike called me later and said, "This is karma hitting them hard." I said, "Maybe, but I do not care anymore." Sarah met me outside and said, "Be careful, she will try to come back into your life." I said, "I am not afraid anymore, she cannot control anything now." My phone kept ringing, but I ignored every call from Anna. She sent messages saying she needs help and wants to talk. I did not reply, I just looked at the screen and stayed silent. Liam asked me why Mom is suddenly trying to come back. I paused and said, "It is complicated, son." He said, "Did she do something wrong?" I looked at him and said, "Yes, but it is not your fault." Noah stayed quiet but held my hand tightly. I told Emma I will let the children decide if they want to see her. She said that is the most balanced decision. I said I just want peace for them now. Mike came to my house and said, "You are handling this better than I expected." I said, "I am not okay, I am just not falling apart anymore." Mike said, "That is growth even if it hurts." I said, "It hurts every day but I keep going." My phone rang again, Anna name on screen. I stared at it for a long time. Sarah texted me, "Do not answer her." I did not answer. Anna left voicemail crying saying she has nowhere else to go. I whispered she had a choice before. Liam asked me, "Are we poor now?" I said, "No, we are learning to live differently." Noah said, "I still miss her sometimes." I said, "That is okay, but we are still safe together." Emma called me and said custody filing is ready. I said, "Proceed." Mike said everything she built is falling apart. I said, "I am not celebrating, I just want quiet." Sarah said she will try to manipulate you again. I said I will not let her. Liam asked, "Did you love her?" I paused and said I did once. I said, "But love is not enough to stay." Noah hugged me and said, "Stay with us always." I said, "Always." I sat alone at night and said, "Everything is quieter now." Mike said, "Quiet is good for you." I said, "Quiet feels empty sometimes." Sarah came with food and said, "You need strength." I said, "I am trying." Liam drew a picture and said, "This is our family now." I looked at it and said, "Yes, it is." Noah asked, "Will she ever come back?" I said, "I do not know." I said, "But we will be okay." Emma said, "Court date is next month." I said, "I will be there." I walked outside and said, "I am no longer waiting for ghosts." Mike said, "That sounds final." I said, "It is not revenge, it is survival." Sarah said, "You changed." I said, "I had to." Liam asked, "Will you be okay without her?" I said, "I already am learning to be okay." Noah said, "I am scared sometimes." I said, "You do not need to be scared, I am here." Mike said, "We are with you." I said, "Thank you both." I looked at the house and said, "This place feels different now." Sarah said, "It feels like healing." I said, "Maybe slowly." Emma said, "You are doing better than most people." I said, "I am just doing what I must." Mike said, "That is enough." I said, "I will not fail them." Liam said, "I am proud of you." I paused and said, "That means everything to me." Noah hugged me and said, "Stay with us forever." I said, "I will stay always no matter what." Mike said, "You should rest tonight." I said, "I will try." Sarah said, "Do not overthink." I said, "I am trying not to." Emma said, "Court will be stressful." I said, "I am ready." Mike said, "That is what worries me." I said I cannot break again. Liam said, are you happy now? I said I am peaceful, not happy. I looked at the sky and said everything I lost taught me something I did not want to learn. Mike said you are stronger than before. I said strength is just pain that learned to stand up. Sarah said you finally stopped waiting. I said yes, I stopped waiting for someone who left. Emma said, what now? I said now I live for my children. Liam said we are your family now. I said yes, you always were. Noah said I love you, Dad. I said I love you too, more than anything. Mike said that is what matters. I said everything else is gone but this stays. Sarah said you made it. I said I survived, that is enough. Emma said proud of you. I said thank you, all home. I told Mike to bring them over at noon because Anna wanted to meet the children, and I kept my voice steady even though my hands were not. Mike said, are you sure about this? And I said I am not sure about anything anymore, but they deserve choice. He nodded and said I will stay nearby. When Anna arrived, she did not look at me first. She looked at Liam and Noah like she was trying to memorize them again. Liam stepped back slightly and said, Dad, who is she? And I felt my chest tighten. I said, this is your mother. Noah stayed behind me and whispered, I am scared, and I said, you are safe. Anna said softly, please let me talk to them, and I stepped aside slowly. Anna said, Liam, I am your mom, and Liam said you were gone. Anna started crying and said I made mistakes. Noah looked at her and said, why did you leave? Anna said I was confused and selfish and I thought I could find happiness somewhere else. I stayed quiet and watched everything because my voice felt heavy. Anna turned to me and said, can you forgive me? I said I am not the same man you left. I said I am not angry anymore, but I cannot forget. She said I came back for my family. I said family is not something you return to when life gets hard. She stepped closer and said, please give me another chance. I said, do not rush me, do not rush them. Liam said, Dad, I do not understand. I said, you do not need to understand everything today. Noah held my hand tighter and said, I like it when it is just us. Anna heard that and cried harder. Anna said, I lost everything. I said, you made choices that led here. She said, I want to fix it. I said, then fix yourself first. She said, I can be better now. I said, being better takes time, not words. She looked shocked and said, so you will not forgive me? I said, I did not say that. I said, I will not decide quickly. She said, I still love them. I said, love without presence does not build anything. Liam looked at her and said, I remember you a little. Noah said, I remember nothing. Anna broke down completely. She said, please let me try again as a family. I said, you must rebuild yourself without depending on us. She said, I cannot do that alone. I said, that is exactly the point. Silence filled the room and I could hear my own breathing. Mike texted me saying, I am outside if you need me, and I replied, not yet. Anna said, what should I do then? I said, live first without asking for permission from your past. She said, I do not know how. I said, then start learning like I did. Liam asked me quietly, are we going to stay together, Dad? And I said, yes, always. Noah asked, can she stay? I said, not today. Anna looked at me like I had become a stranger, and maybe I had. She said, I thought you would hate me. I said, I stopped hate a long time ago. She said, then why does it feel like I lost you forever? I said, because you did not lose me, you lost the version of me that waited. She said, I want that version back. I said, he does not exist anymore. Liam said, I want to go play, and I said, yes, go ahead. Noah followed him slowly. Now it was just me and Anna, and the silence felt heavier. She said, can I see them again? I said, if they want it, not if you demand it. She nodded, crying. I said, I am not your enemy, but I am not your safety net anymore. She said, what are we now? I said, we are the past trying to speak to the present. She whispered, I am sorry. I said, I believe you, but belief is not enough. Silence stayed between us until I finally said, I need to go check on my kids. She stepped aside slowly. As I walked away, she said softly, thank you for not destroying me completely, and I said, I did not save you either, I just saved my children. Mike waited outside and said that looked hard, and I said it was necessary. He said you handled it well, and I said I just refused to rush something that could break us again. We walked back inside, and I saw my kids laughing on the floor, and I realized that was my real life now. I whispered to Mike, this is enough, and he said, yeah, it is. I stood there watching them and felt something inside me finally settle after years of chaos. Anna was no longer the center of my thoughts anymore, only my children mattered. Mike said, "You are really different now," and I said I had to become this version of me to survive everything that happened. Sarah texted asking if I was okay, and I replied, "Yes, I am finally okay, not perfect but present with my kids," and that felt like the first real peace. I stood there watching them, and felt something inside me finally settle after years of chaos. Anna was no longer the center of my thoughts anymore, only my children mattered. Mike said, "You are really different now," and I said I had to become this version of me to survive everything that happened. Sarah texted asking if I was okay, and I replied, "Yes, I am. Finally okay, not perfect but present with my kids," and that felt like the first real peace. I am home now with them, always here. Time passed in a way I could not measure anymore. Days just became routine. I woke up, prepared breakfast, took the kids to school, worked, and came back home. My life was simple now, but it was stable. One evening, Liam looked at me while eating and said, "Dad, are we really okay now?" I smiled slightly and said, "Yes, we are okay. We built this together." Noah added, "It feels like we are always laughing now." I nodded and said, "That is how it should be." Mike visited that night and sat beside me. He said, "You finally look at peace." I replied, "I am not running anymore." Sarah came with food and said, "You look like you found yourself again." I said, "I stopped looking for what broke me." She smiled and said, "That sounds like healing." I said, "It is slow, but yes." One day, Emma called me and said, "Anna sent a letter." I paused and said, "What does she want now?" Emma said, "Just read it." I opened the letter later that night. Anna wrote, "I understand now why you could not take me back. I ruined something real. Thank you for not destroying me when you had every reason to." I sat there quietly after reading it. Liam asked, "What is that paper?" I said, "Just something from the past." Noah asked, "Is she coming back again?" I said, "No, buddy. That chapter is closed." Mike texted me and said, "You okay?" I replied, "Yes. I feel nothing heavy anymore." Sarah asked, "Do you want to respond to her?" I said, "No. Silence is enough." Emma said, "That letter is closure, not a request." I nodded and said, "Then I accept it." That night I sat alone for a long time. I looked at my home, at my children sleeping peacefully. The house was not perfect, but it was full of life again. Liam came out half asleep and said, "Dad, you are not sad anymore, right?" I touched his hair and said, "No, I am not sad like before." He smiled and went back to bed. Noah whispered from the doorway, "Stay with us always." I said, "Always." After they slept, I stood by the window and thought about everything I had lost and everything I had rebuilt. Mike came outside and said, "You made it through hell." I said, "I did not just survive it. I learned from it." He said, "No revenge." I shook my head and said, "No revenge, just life." Sarah texted, "Proud of you." I replied, "I am just finally free." Emma later said, "Most people never recover like this." I said, "I did it for them, not for me." I looked at my kids again and felt something deep and calm inside me. Not happiness that comes and goes, but peace that stays even in silence. Liam said, "We are a family, right?" I said, "Yes, we are everything that matters now." Noah hugged me tightly and said, "I like this life." I smiled and said, "Me too." Later that night, I wrote nothing, I sent nothing, I chased nothing. I just lived. And for the first time in years, I felt no pull toward the past. I finally understood that healing is not forgetting. It is choosing not to return. I closed my eyes and said quietly, "This is my life now." And for once, I believed it completely.